Hey everybody, hold on just a second. Don't fast forward past this intro. I know I normally share a 2 to 3 minute intro. Today in particular, I have some important updates to the show that I'd like you to not only hear, but hopefully act on as well. So stay tuned. My name is Nathan Holritz. Welcome back to Deciding to Love. So this show, so far, we've pushed out 9 episodes. Today will be episode number 10 with Paul and Sarah. And it's a really, really great conversation. But today's episode and moving forward, most episodes, I'm going to be delivering an actual video podcast. In the past, I mentioned the significance of anonymity so that I could get more couples to share more openly, but it looks as though most people are okay being on video, number one. And number two, I think it's better for the show. It feels more personal. It allows me to be able to clip the individual episodes and share parts of that with the audience or potential audience as well. And my big picture dream for this show is actually to do in-person interviews. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second. But moving forward, the majority of these episodes will be video episodes. On that note, I am looking for couples for the show. So if you've been in a long-term romantic relationship, doesn't have to be a marriage, just long-term committed romantic relationship of 10 years or more, and you still like each other, you're still excited about the relationship, I would love to have you on the show to share what you've learned about how to create such a dynamic in a relationship. Look, in a world where many, if not most, long-term romantic relationships, they fall off. People get bored, annoyed, frustrated, and that's just kind of the state that they exist in. They put up with the relationship. I think it's more important than ever that we talk about how to create long-term romantic relationships that we actually want to be in. Not only that, but in the age of ever-developing AI and depersonalization, where in-person interaction and connection and deep relationships may become less and less the norm, I think it's important that we talk about these things. So please, if you are interested in being in the show, or you know somebody who you think would be interested in being in the show, go to decidingtolove.com and click on share your story, or go to decidingtolove.com/share your story, and you can apply to be on the show. I would love to have you on. Now, I mentioned doing in-person interviews. In the near future, I'm going to begin to travel to meet some of our guests, couples, in person, whether I fly to them or I ride my motorcycle. More details on that to come. But I want to do some in-person interviews, and not only interviews, but do little mini documentaries, little 5-minute mini films about the couple's love story. So if you're interested in such an interview and a little mini documentary, you can also apply to be on the show. Again, go to decidingtolove.com and click on share your story. Today's episode is with Paul and Sarah. It's a wonderful conversation. You'll learn more about how I know Paul and Sarah during the show, but listen in closely. There's not only a lot to take away as it relates to long-term romantic relationships, but Paul unexpectedly gives me a little bit of psychoanalysis, shall we say, that was actually really impactful and helpful. The last 4 weeks, 5 weeks or so of my life on an internal level have been really significant. I've learned and grown quite a bit, and I've got a lot of work to do, but Paul's insight was a really wonderful thing, and the timing was wonderful as well. Last note, I know that we've had a break of a few weeks since the last episode. My intention still is to, as consistently as possible, deliver a weekly episode on Thursdays. Next week episode, I'm going to be interviewing a couple on Thursday, so I'll either push the episode out on Friday or Saturday. But as much as possible, as consistently as possible, I do intend to continue to deliver episodes on Thursdays. And as I've mentioned before, I intend to have a therapist or therapists on the show in the near future. If you know of a family and marriage therapist or a sex therapist, I would love to hear from either or both. And so please refer them to the show. You can send them directly to decidingtolove.com, and they can reach me through the contact form there. All right, without further ado, here's Paul and Sarah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Deciding to Love. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz, and it is a privilege to have what feels like longtime friends, Paul and Sarah, even though we haven't seen each other in person now for, I think we figured out about 13 or 14 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, just to give a little bit of context, and I won't always have the opportunity to do this. Some of my guests want to maybe be a bit more anonymous than others, but I had the opportunity to meet Paul and Sarah about 13, 14 years ago. Was at a friend's wedding in Italy. And it was kind of a random, we were just talking about this before we started recording. It was kind of a random group of strangers that became very, very quick friends in the span of, what was it, 3 or 4 days, 4 or 5 days, as we spent time in a little medieval town there in Italy and kind of touring the countryside of Tuscany. It was a beautiful, beautiful experience. But I'll have to say, to give all of our listeners context, especially as it relates to this show now, that even then, your chemistry was quite fascinating to observe. I loved the individual interactions that we had, the conversation. And Paul, I want to actually talk a little bit about my experience on the other side of you here in just a bit. But generally speaking, you all had just a great chemistry. You were certainly both easy to have conversation with. And I'm sure that that all plays a very significant role in the quality of relationship that you've developed over the years. Absolutely. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. I really appreciate you all making time to be on the show today. And maybe before we get into the deep stuff, just maybe a brief introduction as to how the two of you first met. You've been in a relationship now for what, about 20 years? Is that right?
20 years, yeah. Yeah.
How did you first meet?
Would you like to do it?
I'm probably going to go on a bit. Yeah. Okay.
Don't worry, I'll stop her if she goes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, I just come out of a relationship that hadn't been that good. It was a 10-year-long relationship, and I moved down to the south of England. And I thought, right, well, I'm not going to meet my perfect partner in a pub, because that isn't the sort of person I want to be with.
I think just backtrack a little bit. She was still in Wales when I made contact with her.
No, you absolutely weren't. I know.
But you were still in your birthday.
Yeah, I was here on my birthday.
Okay.
This
You
is
look
why
like
I'm
you every
talking.
day. Yeah.
So I came down here and I thought, I'll join a dating website. Never done it before. I just thought, I'm not going to find one in the pub, a partner or anything. So did that. And Paul was one of 3 dates I went on. 2 before. Major red flags, absolutely not. And then we'd been talking online for, I'd say, probably a good month or 2 before we met. Yeah.
Yeah, about 3 months.
Yeah. And I got all the excitement and what have you. And he fitted the bill as far as what he put down and my idea of what I thought I would like, because I thought I was 30 years old. Yes, I literally turned 30 just as we were talking. And I thought, I know what I want now, because I'd been in 2 relationships previously long term, and I knew what I didn't want. So I thought, I'm going to go for something completely different, actually hone in on certain traits that I want. And so he fitted the bill. And 2-3 months later, we had our first date.
June the 15th.
He remembers, you better than me.
World Cup was playing on 2006.
That's what he remembers.
What would you say in those initial interactions online? Because that 3 months is quite a bit of time to not actually meet in person. What were the things that for each of you attracted you to the other person? Maybe if you were to pick 1 or 2 in particular.
I think when I initially saw a picture of Sarah, she was actually with her son, and I didn't think she was a redhead or a ginger warrior. However,
Tuscan sunset,
as men do, we make strategic plans when we go and make these dates. So I reversed into where she was, just in case I could see her walking towards me, just in case I needed to leg it.
Okay.
Anyway, she was too quick and got in the car. So I thought, all right, you're ginger. Because it was, her hair is, as you know,
beautiful red.
Very bright red.
Vibrant.
Yeah, vibrant, yeah. So yeah, we then went out to Bath. to a local town. My perception really is going back many years ago. Can you remember? I'm not sure if you ever saw a picture of Marilyn Monroe on the Playboy magazine when she had red hair. Yeah. So that
I didn't realize the redhead. No.
Yeah. So that was like my
He said it was
woman,
ideal
kind of
woman.
thing.
He said, yeah.
Okay, fantasy, yeah.
So she resonated with me at that point.
Sure.
After going through the day, I thought she was a bit weird, but the things she said, I was like, freaked me out.
But what was it that actually attracted you to me when we were doing sort of like it wasn't FaceTime back then. It was like video cam, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When we were talking. Did you have a connection with me then?
Yeah, of course I did. Yeah, I would have met you.
Yeah, true.
I mean, it was easy.
It was I think that was the key thing here. When we were talking, it was easy. So we weren't coming up against hurdles. Like you might meet somebody and they'll say something that is dead against your values or, your way of thinking, and you'll go, whoa. But there was none of that. It was just easy. It was very friendly, very relaxed, and none of us had any sort of red flags.
I think during the actual date that we had, Nathan, we realized that her partner for 10 years and my wife for 10 years.
He'd also had 2 relationships previously, but he'd married both of them and divorced both of them, whereas I hadn't been married before.
They were both born on the same day, the 20th of August, which was a bit freaky. There was lots of other things.
You and my son born on the same day as well.
Wow.
And then both our fathers had the same name. There was so many things.
My grandma's surname is March, and she was born in March.
I mean, that was less of a thing.
And then you go right back to her family in Anglesey, where I told Sarah a story about my great-gran that lived in Anglesey, but she was a servant and was made pregnant by one of the lords or whatever.
Wow.
The Buckleys, I think it was. And I thought that it was absolutely rubbish. It was a BS. But Sarah said, oh, no, the Buckleys do exist. And you're like, what?
Yeah, they live behind our house in a big manor house. It's all dilapidated now. But I then found out from my mum that my great-great-great-grandfather was actually one of the guys looking after the horses there. And he was working at the same exact time as his ancestor was as well, in the same house. So even though we'd come from completely different countries,
it's like 300 miles from where we are now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there were so many little things that they call signposts. It's on a spiritual level, and they give you these signposts so that when you do meet somebody, and it doesn't have to be on a relationship level, it's there to say, it could be on a job level or anything. They're there to say you're on the right track. We're here to, they give us signs to say this is exactly where you should be right now. So when we started delving into those, it gave us that extra, this is right, we're being watched, that, they've got us. But going back to the first date, we went to Bath, and we were just on like a table and chairs outside, watching the world go by. And I looked over to him, and for a split second, he was on a sun lounger with a beachscape behind him. And in those split seconds, I think maybe 2 seconds at most, I felt like I'd known him for years, like we were married. And this is on my first date. And
I ran at that point.
Well, most women would probably keep that to themselves,
Sure.
because I'd only ever had one vision when I was about 8 years old up until that point. So to have that, it was so overwhelming to have that feeling that I'd known him for years on our first date, that I obviously have no filter. I just say what's on my mind. So I told him, I think I said something like, I've just had a vision. Most sane men would go, oh, okay then.
See ya.
Yeah, make their excuses. But he was quite spiritual as well. And he said, okay, tell me. And he found it quite interesting. And then you said that you actually read palms. So I was like, oh, okay. He didn't tell me that was a way of meeting women, and that's why he learned to do that. But
of course.
He says, of course.
So when we went into the actual bar area, we sat down and he read my palm. And then he started looking a bit concerned and he said, huh, by your hand, it looks like you're going to get married. And I said, oh, no, I don't believe in marriage. I'm the one at the back of the church saying, I bet he's sleeping with the bridesmaid. He'd just come out of his second marriage. Both of them were not good. And so he was, thinking of marriage. So I said, no, definitely wrong. And he goes, no, you've actually met the man you're going to marry and it's going to happen in the next year or two. And so I was just like, well, that's rubbish, but whatever. And he was kind of like, I could tell on his face, he was a bit sort of perturbed by it. Like, why am I wasting my time? Because she's going to get married to somebody else.
Interesting.
It was him.
Yeah, sure enough.
We were married within 2 years.
Wow. Okay, I have to use this though as a bit of a segue. Paul, I mentioned I was gonna talk about my experience being on the other side of you there in Italy. You read my palm in Italy as well.
Yes.
And frankly, I don't remember at this point what the reading was, but what I will say is that the experience, and it's not so dissimilar even to just a little bit that we've been chatting today. You had a certain amount of calm about you that was really great for me at that particular time in my life. In fact, really, I have a bit of I'm certainly a very emotional person and have some manic tendencies at times. And so I guess being on the other side of somebody who is a more steady state, or more steady emotional state, I guess. There's something very appealing to me about that. And you just had the sense of calm about you that was just wonderful, honestly, just to sit in front and you would talk in this very calm, kind of quiet voice. But I'm wondering, Sarah, if there was something about that dynamic of Paul that drew you to him as well.
I think he had more emotional intelligence that I was used to, and that was a big plus. And to be open to spiritual stuff and not run a mile, that was a big plus. And I automatically felt I could tell him anything. And there was an automatic feeling of respect as well. Like he would open the door and stuff like that. And I'd never encountered chivalry at all. And I thought I wouldn't like it, but I did. But yeah, he was just very easy to talk to. And I think when you meet somebody, when it's easy and it's comfortable and there's no nervousness or anything like that, it's just different. And I think we both felt that this was different than we'd ever experienced before.
Paul, is there something about that sense of calm that you've developed over time? Have you kind of always been that way?
I think I've grown. I think I've grown into that.
Okay.
And that really is having gone through 2 horrendous relationships. You kind of take stock really, and I think you realize that you understand it.
Why it happened the way it did. Yeah.
And having reflection at that point in my life, I was probably the best I thought I could be, which is, I guess, is a reasons why I was reflecting, and Sarah came into my life. But yeah, so I've always been relatively calm in any situation. People do tend to gravitate towards me as regards to opening up, and I can sense people's emotions in that way. I am an emotional person, but I'm not like some people are, very emotional.
You're not outwardly emotional.
Yeah, so I tend to sense things or notice things, even the smallest things that seems out of place. Like with your situation, I knew that, you needed, I don't know, probably the calmness, to be honest. I did sense that you were stressed,
Mm-hmm.
and you would disappear, which was concerning, because I think we lost you actually, and we're quite worried about you at some point. Oh, God,
He probably just went
Yeah.
for gelato.
yeah.
Oh, it was so good too.
But yeah, so I can be very calm, and I tend to look at things reasonably rational.
You can detach, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless I get emotional. So if somebody upsets Sarah or Georgine or my children,
Yeah.
then I'm totally
Oh,
irrational.
totally. Yeah, different side.
Sure. Well, a reason to be upset, I guess, at that point. Yeah, there's something to, and by the way, your intuition was accurate. I think it was only about 6 months or so prior to that Italy trip. My ex and I had split. It was a marriage of about 10 years. And I mentioned to you all before we started recording today that I've been in this kind of transition phase of my life in the last year or so, but certainly that was another transition point when we met back in 2012. It was New Year's 2012 going into 2013. And so your intuition was certainly accurate. And yeah, there was just something, it's interesting. I've only been on the other side of very few people in my life, particularly in conversation, that made me feel that level of comfort and just kind of a stillness, if you will. And you definitely had that impact. And we only had the chance. I mean, we spent those few days together, and then I haven't seen you since, but it was very impactful. And so I have to at least compliment you for that, because I don't think I ever have.
Thank you.
But
No, I'm very, I feel very humble, Nathan, that you say that.
He'll love that.
no, it's a wonderful trait. And honestly, it's something that at this stage of my life, I want to further develop myself. I've always loved conversation, but I think particularly in the last 10 years or maybe a bit more, I've been the one to be talking, and I'm learning to quiet and to be, and do a better job of being the listener again.
It's hard.
But you know what? You say that. So from what you say, Nathan, it sounds like you do a lot of negative talk to yourself.
Fair enough. Yes.
We're trying not to be the psychoanalysts now.
That's what I mean is that you're very analytic, I think, and you have a lot of reflection. And I feel that because you are at a high level as far as your expectation for you to do something, when you don't achieve that or something goes wrong, your first person that you're looking at is yourself.
What did you do? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which, it is a good trait to have the reflection
with balance.
And not so good to still hold those emotions that aren't really serving you as such. So, and that could be at a spiritual level.
Mm-hmm.
And, so those things that maybe you learned when you were much younger, and within that religious environment, there are certain things that you have to do.
Expectations. And,
yeah. I mean, I was brought up in a Catholic church until I was about 8. And then it all went out the window.
Yeah, they kicked you out.
Yeah, we had the priest knocking on our door and saying, why weren't we at church? So, and I'm just typically Catholic. But yeah, I think there is there's certainly a big detachment from the relationship that you have with yourself currently, which every time you go and visit friends that you've known for many years, and including family members, you'll always fall back into that Nathan was 8 or 9 years of age. And you'll probably cringe a little bit when you do. Mm-hmm. So it's just recognizing that, acknowledging that, and then that's kind of help you really be the core person that you are. So you probably feel loads of stuff here.
We had to work through a lot of our past experiences and where we'd gone wrong in our past relationships.
Actually, Sarah, before you get, because I actually want to get to that. I want to talk about that. Before we do that, let me ask you one question, because I want to put and first of all, Paul, I appreciate the feedback. I really do.
Sorry, I didn't want to make you feel a bit uncomfortable then?
Not at all. Oh my goodness, not at all. No. And I think for our listeners too, it's good to hear that type of feedback as well. You're absolutely right that it's easy to get caught, whether in the context of a relationship or not, to get caught in our heads in that internal dialogue that can be very, very critical. And what you were saying reminded me of a conversation that I actually had with a friend yesterday, and he was talking about this idea of internally, essentially saying thank you for the old behaviors that may have served us in the past. And Sarah's nodding for anybody who can't see the video, but yeah, Sarah's nodding. But showing a level of appreciation. I know some people hear that and they're gonna be like, that sounds weird, but and it's a sense of internal gratitude for how those behaviors may have served us in the past, but then of course simultaneously stepping away from those or stepping beyond those and being
It's
able
learning
to
from them.
Yeah.
Because the most traumatic things that will happen in your life are the ones you will learn the most from. And my two relationships, especially the first one, was so abusive. I couldn't even go into it. It was that abusive, Look, I've actually got a lifelong restraining order on him for life. It was that bad. But I don't regret a second of it, because everything that I learned from how I was allowing myself to be treated, making excuses for his treatment of me, and then realizing that I wasn't putting myself first. I left because of our son, not me, and I grew so much from that horrendous experience that I was able to learn so much from it. So I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
And I know people that have been stuck in those relationships for 20 years and they don't know how to get out. I mean, I had to leave the country. But yeah, I don't regret it for a second. Same with the second one that lasted 10 years. I was miserable for the last 4, cried myself to sleep. Oh, I used to drink. Yeah.
Paul's motioning with the drink.
Yeah, I used to drink every night. I couldn't bear it. And yeah, I was miserable enough to cry myself to sleep for 4 years on that one. And he refused to go. He just wouldn't go. And he would use our son to make me sound like I was the crazy one. And I felt like I had no escape. We are actually very good friends. I'm very good friends with him now.
Wonderful.
Later found out that he is autistic and he was struggling with change. And so if a situation where there was change would come up.
She's diversifying now and digressing.
No, I'm saying how our
It's good.
experiences and our bad relationships do help our current ones.
They do.
So I learned a great deal from that as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually come back to that here in just a second, but I want to flip the script for just a second. Let's go a positive direction. And I didn't even send you this question in advance, but I'd be curious to hear from both of you, just like a 1-sentence or 2-sentence answer. What are you most proud of about your relationship at this stage?
Ladies first.
The fact that we don't disrespect one another ever, never have, never will. We don't raise our voices or shout or swear or actually, no, I think I've sworn twice to you, haven't I? Yeah. 20 years.
I was nodding.
But it's a very rare thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's how we treat each other. There's that unsaid level of respect that we have never crossed. And I think I'm proudest of that, because I've seen amazing couples and they shout and scream and think it's okay. And you don't forget those words.
No.
And
I want to come back to that actually, because it's one of the talking points I wanted to kind of get into. You'd mentioned that to me in advance of our conversation today. So I'll come back to that. Paul, the thing you're most proud of?
I think what I'm most proud of, and this is really based on my background, is that we're still together.
I love it. Yeah.
For me, that's a massive thing. So I had probably emotional issues. So I did suffer from lack of self-esteem, and because of the relationships that I was in, I needed something to make me feel okay. Yeah, I had ADHD, but I was aware of what I was doing, and I didn't care.
Mhm.
I needed that. So, and it was difficult. Every day was fraught with arguing in front of the children. It was just horrendous. And I think, when I met Sarah, it was just too easy.
Hmm.
I'm expecting something to.
Yeah, he used to come to where I was when I was say at a pub, and he'd come to the car park, drive up there, and then phone me as if he was in his hometown, and was like, "Oh, what are you up to?" And he was trying to catch me out, like talking to other men.
I wasn't really stalking her.
What? No, he wasn't stalking me, but because of his previous relationships where he had always cheated from every relationship, from a teenager right up until the day I met him, because he'd always done that and justified it in his head because of the behavior between him and that person.
Sure.
He was judging me on his own.
Projecting.
Yeah. Projecting.
My turn to talk.
Okay.
Obviously shadowed that bit there. So I think, So I'm really proud that we're still together. It's still easy. I can be actually who I am.
Yeah.
With all my thoughts. If I want to pick my nose and wipe it on the curtain, she's okay with that.
Don't bother me.
Like he doesn't find out. So we're very both independent, but we're together.
Yeah.
So, and when we do get together, it could be in the morning or it could be in the evening or we go away somewhere or whatever, then we're together. But we both lead our independent life. So we can still grow and learn together.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it really is, it's just so easy to love Sarah. However, I have to consciously remind myself how much I love my wife. And
what do you mean by that?
I think that's really important because when you are in a long-term relationship, it's very easy to lament and take things for granted. So I have to, I might sometimes look at a picture and go, "Oh, that was then." And I think I look at my wife in the picture, I just remind myself how gorgeous she is, or how caring she is. But yeah, so that's what I'm proud of. I'm proud of the fact that we're still together.
You're doing
That
this
I've
thing
kept
together.
your
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple of follow-up questions to that, and I'd love to hear from both of you on this. You said, and actually I think, Paul, you said it the most so far, but it's come up multiple times in our 30 minutes or so that we've been chatting. You said it's easy. And the reason that resonates so much with me is I was in a long-term relationship where things were, they felt, I'll say for the most part, quite easy. And then it got to a point in that relationship where the other person said, "I wish things were easier," or "I wish they felt easy again." I would argue that any long-term relationship requires a certain amount of work in order for that relationship to
Communication.
not just to exist, but to be great, right? There has to be a certain level of intention. And I know maybe not everybody likes the word work as it relates to the relationship, but the reality is at the end of the day, we have to at least be intentional.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you when you say the relationship is easy? Because I know just based on conversation, like some of the feedback that Sarah gave me in advance of our conversation today, I know it's taken work for you all to have the relationship that you do.
Yeah.
So what does it mean for it to be easy? What does that look like?
When we do have, because we are just like everyone else, something will come up that will be like oh, I wasn't expecting that. So that makes me feel angry or upset because you've done this or that. That means we need to have a conversation so that whatever it was doesn't come up again. It's like basically communication has to be open, and it might take me, in my case, it takes me about 12 hours to digest something.
This is after she's thrown the knife.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not violent. So it's far easier to be silent. So it will take me about 12 hours to digest what I am feeling, so that when I come back to him with something, there isn't any resentment or anger. It's because I've really thought about what has happened that's upset me. And then I can come in and not bring my feelings onto him,
Wow.
you know?
Did
So
you have to learn that for yourself, that you needed that 12 hours and now you're intentional about that?
yes.
I love
So,
that.
yeah, I had to learn that, because if I didn't have that, I would come in hot, and
Yeah.
then his automatic thing would be defensive. So he would not take full culpability for it. And that would be enrage me even more.
Yeah.
So I realized the way I have to process things is I need to get my emotional state calm. So I need to go to my room or wherever, and just think about what's happened, think about it from his point of view, not just my own, think about what might have led up to it,
Hmm.
and then work out how we can resolve it together as a couple.
That's great.
And
And you're an admittedly emotional person, Sarah.
very,
So to hear you describe that, I think it's a wonderful example and reminder for all of us. But would you say that that is in part what has made the relationship, quote, easier? Is that rather than in the moment just going hard in the argument or in the
yeah.
conflict, you take a step away from it?
Yeah, I have to. I have to, because I am so emotional. I don't want to ever say something out of anger,
Hmm.
because you can't take it back.
Hmm.
And so when you're hurt, you automatically want to maybe hurt back, you know? So I have to have that level of control, that's it, in my own emotions, to be, because I think one thing that we both realized was, because we'd kind of had two terrible relationships in the past, when we found each other, we knew this was very different, and neither one of us ever wanted us to have a problem like that.
Mm,
We wanted to stay together forever, because
mm.
this was something special, and we knew that in order to do that, there would be work. Every time there was a problem, we would have to calm ourselves, come back together, sit down and discuss it, and be open and honest, and work out ways to avoid it ever happening again.
I
Okay.
think
So,
what stands out with that, Nathan, is that the key to it is criticism and name calling.
mm,
You know, once you say,
Anything like
you're
that.
this or you're that, then, and especially, if you're neurodiverse, it hits you 10 times harder.
mm.
So immediately, you just go, right, I'm gonna, respond. And then what happens then is it continues, it continues, and continues.
The respect nosedives, so everything.
Resentment. And then
Resentment.
what you have then is you've got a big bag. So every time you have a little disagreement, it's
Mm.
always 90% of what happened prior and 10% here and now. So when we do have a disagreement, it's normally 10% and we can resolve it. And you can never, ever win an argument with your wife. You just got to go with it and go, and invariably sometimes when I think maybe she's a little bit out of order, and she'll go upstairs, and then what happens is I feel her detachment.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like detached from me, and I feel it emotionally. It's just like weird. And eventually I'll go up and say, I'm like, really sorry.
Hmm.
Let me look at that. I think maybe this happened, that happened. And of all the disagreements that we've had over the last 20 years, there was only one really of recent where actually Sarah misheard what I'd said about something. And it was like,
Yes.
oh my God, I don't think we spoke to each other for a day or something. And then she said, when I said, blah, 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 this is what it is. She was like, what? I thought you meant this.
Yeah.
So
Breakdown in communication, because
yeah,
I mean, Paul's deaf, and so I'm, because of my ADHD, I've got a million things in my head. So I'm taking most of what people say to me in, but there is a lot lost sometimes, you know? So that was, yeah, a miscommunication. I think I mean, when I say we go through hard times, I mean, I got very ill about, when was it? 2014, end of 2014.
August 2014, actually.
No,
Continue.
that was when I started. That's not when I woke up and couldn't talk. That was December 27th.
Okay, was.
Yeah, December 27th.
I digress.
Oh, it's it. That was when we moved into the house, the August one, or the July. But yeah, I had a massive breakdown, and I woke up unable to talk or understand language. And up until that point, I'd been very successful with my business and taking care of everything, including our young son at the time. And Paul was suddenly thrust into this thing where his wife was pretty much catatonic. Oh, it's it. And he had to look after everything, things that I'd been doing. And I think that was a real learning curve, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm somebody that I was the youngest out of 4 children, albeit we don't take responsibility for anything. Yeah, so we don't know that. And it was just all the things that I didn't do in my life come back to you again until you
Learn.
till you do them. So if you know, if you're in a situation where you shouldn't be on that road and you internally say, I'm going to stick this out, I'm going to be, you know, I think you know what I mean, Nathan, when you say you kind of just fight your internal and you go, no, I'm not going to give up. And then what happens? It goes tits up. Worse. Until all of a sudden you go, actually, no, I think I need to make a change here.
Yeah.
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 And it does. I always find that.
That was a huge learning curve for both of us. Yeah.
Yeah. So learning that.
So just to bring it back around though to the conversation about things being easy, and maybe I took that word too literally, but if you were just to sum up the way that you describe your relationship being generally, of course, generally speaking, easy in nature, how would you say that you've made it that way? If you, again, just dialing it back to a couple of sentences, how would you
All
sum
right.
up how you've made it easy?
Mine
3
would
words.
be don't hold anything in. If you feel resentment about something, like, you need to voice it, you need to communicate, and then work out. Yeah, it's all about communication.
But to your earlier point, do so after you've taken the time to process it. So you're not
Yes.
not
Don't go
blurting
in. Don't
things
go in
out.
hot. No, don't go in hot.
And then Paul, your
So-
side?
I would say the biggest thing for me really is don't try to make your partner feel like she's nothing. So never criticize on any level.
Yeah.
Don't have a massive expectation of her unless you actually have that communication level, because whoever it is you're with isn't going to meet your expectations because she doesn't know them or he doesn't know them.
Yeah.
And that's quite important, really. And
I've got that actually on my list of talking points here to come back. We're going to come back to that because I think it's a really important point of conversation, not making a relationship a guessing game. So I'll come back to that in just a second. But you may have seen me look down a couple of times. I'm literally taking notes, old school style, in a notebook here. One of the other things that you mentioned, Paul, is the word love. And you said that you had to remind yourself to love Sarah.
Yeah, it's not
intentional in that.
I wouldn't say it was a reminder.
It's
I would say
between in love
consciously, you have to consciously work.
Make that choice.
As a guy,
yeah,
you know, all the frilly bits have gone, and you know, you're just out there working. You're trying to make things work, but you just need to stop and go, I really do love my wife so much. I'm in love with her.
In love, that's the key.
And for a guy has consciously got to do that, you know, because his partner, his wife, she will feel it.
Yeah.
If you're making, if you're being tactile, if you're going up behind her and kissing on the neck or doing whatever you want to do, but you need to be able to just do that, and then just maybe surprise her one day with something. Not that I do that, but I'm just saying.
It'd be nice.
That's your suggestion, your advice for other people. The other thing that you mentioned as well, and this is a loaded topic. I don't want to go too far down this road, but I think it's important that we at least touch it because you mentioned the significance of this for your relationship. Independence, that you are in this relationship together, but then you're also living, you're individuals and you're still doing your own thing. And I mean, this is self-serving quite a bit actually, because I've struggled quite a bit with this idea of codependence over the years in different ways. And it's something that I've put a lot of work into, particularly actually in the last 3 or 4 weeks, as I continue to realize the significance of it and how that's manifested itself in my behavior. So independence, I think there's some real significance to a long-lasting, enjoyable relationship. Esther Perel talks about the significance of independence. What is that? How have you done that intentionally, or has that just kind of come naturally for both of you?
Well, I think we both need that because of our neurodivergence and what have you. So we have to have alone time. I mean, this will be with anyone, we have to have space for ourselves so that we can be alone and what do they call it? Sort of regulate ourselves,
Regenerate.
So
That's a good one too. Yeah.
We do have our own interests and what have you, and it can simply be that he's in the garage next door or the office and I'm up in my room or in the living room or cooking or whatever. But we know that the other one's around, but we enjoy being by ourselves in our own heads, and it's nice to have that for both of us. We're very similar. I mean, if one of us wasn't in that sort of person, then that would cause an issue. I'm sure the other one might feel slightly abandoned and what have you. But
neediness.
Yeah, but we actually match each other very well with the way we like to live our lives.
I think what is relevant is that we don't ask permission to be ourselves.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say to Sarah, "Oh, is it okay, baby, if I go in the garage?" Or "Is it okay if I do this?" Or "It's okay if I do that?"
Yeah.
It'll be, "I'm going to be in the garage, babes. Shout me if you need me, but I'll go. I'll come in occasionally and check on. Are you all right, love? Do you want a cup of tea? Or do you want this?" And then I'll just go on and do. But I will check on her.
But we've got trackers on our phones, so if we can't find each other, we just look on our phone and go, "Oh, he must be working."
Apart from yesterday, I got told off.
Yeah, because your tracker was off.
I have to ask about that actually, and then I want to come to this permission thing because I think it's a really interesting conversation. But does that feel a little bit controlling? I mean, just from your experience, like
the
always,
tracker thing.
Yeah, the tracker thing. Does that feel weird as an adult to have a tracker?
We don't have to. I would say it's the opposite because we don't have to tell each other where we're going or anything like that, because if the other one really needs to know, they can just see.
Okay.
So I'll leave the house and I won't think of telling anyone.
Oh,
I'm very independent. So I'll just do my own thing, but I'll know if he's worried about me, he can just look and see where I am.
Okay.
I think
so. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Nathan, is that if you were up to something, of course,
or suspicious,
you'd be concerned.
Yeah. That's when it's different.
So if you're open about everything, about what you're doing, where you go, or your phone, or whatever the case, my phone, yeah. So the people that might respond to that, "Oh, that's a bit controlling." Well,
it would be if you didn't trust each other 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. And then I could see the flip side of that, which is, well, but if you trust me, then why do you need to turn on the tracker? It's
because I want to know where he is. And so that I'll know, is he in the garage or is he at work 2 hours away?
So it's a family thing. So
I've got my mum on there, my dad.
And to be clear, I'm not criticizing you all. I'm just curious about this conversation in general, because I've heard inklings of this in the last, I don't know, say year or so as well. And, it's one thing for us to have that with our kids, for example, that are still living at home, and it's our job to take care of them. there's something about it that feels weird beyond that, but I understand what you're saying too.
I think if you're looking at it, it's to try and be nosy or try and, like for anything other than, I haven't seen my dad in a few days. Hopefully he's okay.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I can see he's been driving around. No problem.
Yeah, if you're not picking it up every hour to look and yeah, I see what you're saying, where it becomes obsessive in nature. That makes sense. And I guess maybe it's a good segue to
don't look at it every day. I might look at it once a month, but if I don't know where he is, I can see where he is.
As when I'm home.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I won't even know where he is when we're in the house.
I need to know.
Just very, very briefly, because there's so much I want to talk about, but the idea of permission, I talked about this with Joe and Denise on a previous podcast episode, and I think it was so good that it was brought up. Good that we came to it again today. Just very, very briefly, speak to the significance of the freedom, the independence that does not require asking for permission. Paul, the way that you described it, I thought was brilliant. Because so many couples exist in that space. I think it's one thing, I think the word that was used in the podcast episode with Joe and Denise was acknowledgement. It's one thing to acknowledge or to, out of respect, say, hey, just so you know, But this idea that couples are asking each other, partners are asking each other permission to do something as 30, 40, 50, 60 years, that just is mind-boggling to me.
Oh, I can't bear it. Yeah.
And I understand you both have this independence built into your relationship. I think that's really healthy. But what would you, maybe if you had the opportunity to talk to a couple, so for our listeners, ultimately, what would you say to those who are maybe functioning that way right now and could benefit from a sense of independence that comes from not having to ask that permission?
I'll let you go in a sec.
Yeah.
I would say, if I could be blunt, really.
Please.
I would say you're in the wrong relationship. You're in the wrong phone box. You need to take responsibility for the person that you are. So I think when you ask, what are you actually asking? Is you're asking your life partner? Are you really asking your mum, aren't you? Or if you're a girl, you're asking your dad. You're saying, "Oh, Dad, is it okay if I do this?" So that relationship that you had with your family, albeit it could be quite toxic, and all of those things that you learned within that family are now embroiled in the relationship that you currently have. So, grow up, recognize that the person that you are is, amazing, self-appreciation, and just take a step back and remind yourself that it doesn't matter who you are. You don't need permission to be the person that you are. And it's only at that point then when you start actually thinking and taking action on that, things change very quickly. And you might actually see that possibly the relationship that you're in is actually quite toxic, but you didn't recognize it before because, you were trying to appease that person or, you wanted them to accept you and, you don't think that they loved you. So you asked permission to, it's quite deep, Nathan, I think. And,
it is. And on the flip side of it, I guess for the person who is expecting their partner to ask for permission is just this underlying sense of needing control or wanting control, I should say.
I mean, can you imagine some guys, what are you doing? I didn't say you could do that. What sort of relationship is that?
Yeah, it's a parental
relationship.
Even
a wife saying, no, you're not going here. You're not going golf tonight. You got to take the kids out.
Yeah. Wow. It's a loaded one, but I appreciate you just kind of speaking on that briefly. Again, so much that I want to get into, so I'm going to actually keep the conversation going here. You alluded to this multiple times now so far, and I think it's really important that we talk about, and I'm going to read the quote verbatim, Sarah, that you sent to me ahead of our conversation, making sure we didn't repeat past mistakes. You said this was your biggest relationship challenge. We had to make sure we talked through issues that we'd struggled with in our former relationships. And I know we could spend hours on this, but what would you say, like, what did these conversations sound like? And maybe more specifically, what mindset? I'm thinking, for example, just the idea of setting aside ego, but what mindset enabled those conversations to be productive?
Right. Well, you have to have a serious respect for one another straight away. And with me, I'm very analytical. I like to deep dive and what have you into things. And the biggest things that I felt we needed to discuss was why he'd cheated in relationships, to make sure that it never ever cropped up in ours. So we did a lot of work on that. And you learnt a lot as well, didn't you? And I was able to understand his point of view. I didn't agree with it, but I could understand it.
Mm.
And I was able to learn what he needed to feel valued and appreciated, and all the things that he felt was lacking in his previous relationships. So it made me able to realize, so, okay. I mean, I'm not saying I had to pander to his ego in order for him not to cheat. But it made me realize that he's a really sensitive soul. And I had to make sure that I never crossed that line with belittling him or anything like that, because it will hit him hard and the resentment will grow. So just by working out together what we needed to do in order for us not to follow roads we'd gone down in the past, like I, in previous relationships, I'd not been allowed to talk about my feelings because they both shut me down straight away, would say I was over emotional, crazy. They weren't emotionally mature at all, so they couldn't have that conversation with me. So nothing was ever solved, ever. So I made sure that I picked somebody that was emotionally mature enough to have these conversations with. And that if I did have issues from past trauma, or anything where I'd have a trigger that he wouldn't automatically know about, that we'd talk about it. So I wouldn't be triggered and he'd be thinking, what's she on about? So a one that we recently came across was Paul was speeding and he didn't slow down. And then I asked him to slow down and he didn't. And we're not talking about like ridiculous speeds, but because I'd had a past traumatic experience where my ex had done really bad speeding and even sped up when I would ask him not to, and I'd be in tears and it would really traumatized me. Once we got back and and I decompressed and I'd been on my own and what have you, I was able to talk to him and say why I had that previous trauma. So he is very understanding now of how I am in a car.
Sure.
But it just takes communication, and then you have to learn as you go. Even after 20 years, we're learning.
It's I don't like to be understanding, Nathan. Honestly,
Yeah.
I don't like people, if I'm honest, because people are false in lots of ways. A lot of people. I tend to levitate towards people who are very real.
Okay.
That
Honest.
this is who I am.
Yeah.
And there's no bravado, there's no front. Let's just see who you are.
Yeah.
You're fortunate enough to be like that.
Oh, thank you.
So, I felt that you were approachable because I need to talk to somebody because I've got no friends anymore. But I think, yeah. So, where was I? What was I talking?
I don't know. We've gone on for the tangents.
Yeah.
No, but Paul, actually, so Sarah mentioned, if you don't mind talking about this, Sarah mentioned that you all talked through what motivates you previously to cheat and the old relationship.
Oh my God, yeah.
And
lack of self-esteem. Absolute lack of stuff. I didn't think very much of myself. I was continually being called, a bad dad.
Or a bad husband, or
bad husband. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I wasn't working out. all the sort of things that you can probably think of the worst things that you could possibly say to a man.
Hmm.
So generally with any type of relationship, from a man's eyes, if there is just a little bit of negativity, it's pretty much game over. You guys will just detach, and then that will snowball, and then you got that 9 and 10, 90% past here, 10% here and there. So my self-esteem, so when I came out of those relationships, I was able to really look at who I was and why maybe.
When we discussed it.
Yeah. Well, sec. But I made myself a better person. So I projected this persona of, loving myself. So, and I always believe that you can only love somebody as much as you love yourself. So if I'm 50% on the scale, I'm only going to love somebody 50% because that's all I got to give.
Yeah.
But when you're at a very high level and you think, yeah, do you know what, it's really great being me. I think I would do me. You kind of just project, you project that. Yeah. And this is like, again, this is what's in here is going to come to you.
Yeah.
But it's a myth.
Like attracts like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But yes, there was a few, we had a rocky start. I was still kind of into a mind muscle mode as about, I still need to have this. But Sarah, that's the one thing that Sarah gives me that I don't need to have fulfilled from anybody else apart from her. I get, I can be myself. I can, she loves the person that I am. She's not critical of me. If we have an issue, then we just say, oh God, got this happened. And then she'll go, what? She'll just say, but okay, I know it pops. Just like, oh, right. Okay. So when there is an issue with things that maybe come across in Sarah's life externally, then I'll say, right, babes, okay, it'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Because Sarah does take things emotionally, and this is only of recent that she's been able to recognize that she hasn't got to be that person for everybody.
Yeah, I can't fix everyone.
No. And this is, I appreciate you sharing that, Paul. And I want to use that as a segue to, I guess, maybe back to a bit of conversation about the idea of codependence, because another thing that I wrote down earlier that one of you mentioned in passing was the word regulate. We were talking about the idea of regulating emotions. And this has been something, I mean, it's embarrassing to say, frankly, at 46 years old, that I finally realized this aspect of working through my codependence issues is the idea of putting my emotional regulation in the lap of somebody else or other people, and how I needed to learn to take that back. What is your thought? Because you said being opposite of Sarah has ultimately enabled you to be in a better place with your self-esteem. But where's the balance between managing that on your own and then relying on your relationship with Sarah for at least a piece of that?
So, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I don't rely on Sarah.
Okay.
The important thing for me is, and I've said this to loads of people, is that I am the most important person in my life. If I'm okay, Sarah will be amazingly okay. If Sarah's okay, I'll be okay. If either one of us aren't okay, we feel it.
Yeah.
So it's, we don't rely on each other. She doesn't hurt me. It's my perception. I don't hurt her. It's her perception of what I've said or done. So when we say we're independent, we literally are one person. We take responsibility for what we do. In most cases, I don't always, but we.
And I'm accepting of that.
Yeah. So yeah, we're just real, Nathan. We're not. We haven't got our. We have got our parents' issues in the past going on in the back there, but now we forgive them for what those things that happened. We don't have to hold those and you just can't hold that kind of emotion.
Yeah.
You just can't. It's too much.
It'll
Just
seep
that-
into everything.
Yeah.
It really will.
and it just dysregulates every relationship you have, because you're bringing in other people into the relationship. It
That's
should be
a great
just
way to
you.
put it. Yeah.
I would say that being neurodiverse and both of us having ADHD, we both have emotional regulation difficulties. So we will naturally find it harder to regulate our emotions. So, like, I learned that from a young age, that if I lose it, I'll lose it. Then I realized that I could be quite violent if I did that. So I then went the other way and internalized everything with my second relationship, and didn't express any emotional things that could cause an argument or any sort of problems whatsoever. So I was almost scared to say how I felt, in case it erupted into something I couldn't handle. So that's where I think I learned, when I met Paul, I had to then go away, regulate my emotions, and then come back almost seeing it from a third party's view, and then work on it. But I would
And
say
actually, as you say that, I guess it's hitting me that is a beautiful example of true independence versus codependence. Because when I think back to my previous marriage, and I still feel terrible for it, but there was a tendency that I had in conflict with my ex to continue to just like push the issue. I wanted to talk about it right then, right now. I had to, and of course, it only naturally made it worse because emotions are heightened in the moment. But that was in part a codependent behavior. Your ability to be able to step away from the situation and, as you say, regulate your own emotion is a beautiful example of independence. And I think a good reminder, certainly for all of us, and something that we should do in the context of conflict. But that's a good reminder for me, at the very least. This show as a whole is somewhat selfish in nature because it's driven largely by my curiosity and desire to learn. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's a really good example. It's something I'm going to have to think about a little bit more. I want to use this as a segue, though, Sarah, to something that I think you brought up earlier in our conversation as well. And it's when I asked about the biggest lessons learned in your relationship, one of the things, and I'll read this verbatim again, that you said is never shout or say anything hurtful. Words do hurt and wear away the respect and affection. If your partner says something mean just to hurt you, you don't forget those words. Shouting is a form of abuse. I know that we've kind of touched on this throughout our conversation today already, but do you have, maybe each of you could give one piece of advice as to how to intentionally take this approach to communication with our partner, where we're mitigating that, maybe even if it's a split second urge to say something that's mean or nasty, to avoid doing so, to be respectful. You'd think it would be natural and innate to somebody that you love, but it doesn't always happen. How do you manage that in the moment?
Because it becomes habit, to react a certain way. So once you've started that habit, it does take a lot of work not to get into it. We never started, when we first met, we never started that habit because we'd had it in our both previous relationships. So we realized that we didn't want to be that person anymore, So I made, I was just so passionate and careful with this relationship that I didn't ever want to go down the road I had done before in relationships. So I put the work in, and I realized that I do need to take myself away so that I don't say something out of anger or anything like that, or, but
What about for you, Paul?
Getting to know yourself is important.
Well, and Sarah, again, I have to reiterate that example is a really great one for all of us, to whether it's 12 hours or even 12 minutes that we learn to step away. I think that's huge. And I'll speak for myself, especially as somebody like myself who is naturally a very emotional person. I'm learning to tone that down. But even if it's just a few minutes, being able to step away. And I think you all have obviously established that this dynamic in your relationship, but I think a certain level of trust in the relationship, big picture, and certainly in your partner, that enables the space or the ability and ultimately the space to step away from that conversation in the moment rather than feeling like you have to fix it right then, I think is a wonderful thing as well. But Paul, maybe if we can jump to you, what would you be your piece of advice or your kind of coping mechanism, if you will, in the moment in order to mitigate that type of communication?
I think what's important is actually where you place yourself
Hmm.
with any type of relationship, and that's not just your partner, your life partner. That's with your parents, it's with your friends, it's with all of those people that you may feel are um, supportive of you until you change.
Hmm.
And it's only when you make a small change that you will see probably some type of resistance from them, because most people don't like change. Most people can't manage change. And that then becomes conflicting. And of course, there's a big part in your family. You have to recognize that you are 100% solely responsible for how you feel about yourself, about the world around you, about the people in your life. If you are um, the type of person that is of anxious with or needy within relationships, then you need to work on
Or
yourself.
combative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to work on yourself. You need to actually just really enjoy being the person that you are.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, and it goes back to you being the most important person in your life, your children are the most important, because what's going to happen to your children if you're not okay? What's going to happen to your wife if you're not okay?
So true.
Actually, yeah. So you really got to work on yourself, both physically and emotionally. You need to reflect and look at where you are. You need to understand when you go and see your parents, or if they're still alive, or your friends, what changes do you make to accommodate those people? Or they might say to you, "You've changed, Nathan." You If that is the case, then well done,
Hmm.
because they've noticed. Now, that's a good opportunity to walk away from that relationship, because they're not supporting you now.
Hmm. This is another quote. You said it's not a guessing game. You have to discuss what your needs are. And Sarah, maybe for people like yourself and myself, we're talkers. We like to talk through things and talk about things. That may seem natural for us, but it isn't for everyone. And so I'd love to get both your takes on this again. Like, what is the reason, do you think, that a lot of partners, particularly in long-term romantic relationships, just simply don't communicate? Is it because it's easier, because it's uncomfortable? What is it?
I think we just assume too much,
Hmm.
like we just think, well, they must know that I'm annoyed at this because I've been a bit off with them or something like that. They must. And I know that there is sits like with, say, I'm not making a big thing about neurodivergence, but with autism, many autistic people don't always pick up on non-verbal cues.
Sure.
So they need it to be told. They need to be, told exactly how the other person is feeling. So I spent 10 years with an autistic man, and I thought he was so cruel and unfeeling and stuff like that. And when we realized that, and he got diagnosed with autism, I suddenly realized, it was because he thought I was crazy because he hadn't picked up on me being upset for the 4 days previous. So when I eventually lost it or started crying and couldn't get out of bed, he was there thinking, well, that's weird. Like that's, because he hadn't picked up on anything. So I think when I say we're not mind readers, if we have an emotion that we want to get through to the other person, they aren't a mind reader. You have responsibility yourself to tell them exactly how you feel and why you feel it in a non-confrontational way,
Hmm.
so that it doesn't put them in a situation where they might find that you're attacking them in any way. You're simply just saying, I felt this when you did that, or, you know, I'm struggling with that a bit. Can we discuss it? And it be in a non-confrontational way, very lighthearted. But you have to say it, because women, we assume, I think a lot of us, that the men are going to know what we're thinking, because we would pick it up in other women. Women tend to be, we would know, you know.
Interesting. So you think that's what it is, that you're used to the notion or idea of intuition amongst female friends, and so you assume the guy is doing the same thing.
We tend to pick up the micro sort of things, you know, whereas men might not, because they're not maybe as emotional with each other, you know, so they will not pick up on the tiny things.
I think that's quite an important note, is that I am emotional with my mates because I'm happy with the person that I am. And that can be, I'm happy with my sexuality, I'm a bloke, but I love myself to a degree because I've got so much I can give people and I can support them.
And there's a lot of men that aren't as open.
Yeah, there's some people that, you know, but you've got to, having that expectation of somebody who doesn't know what the expectations are, you can't meet them. You shouldn't really have expectations. You just have honesty. So you just say, you know, oh God, when you said this, I felt like this. Now that isn't saying you hurt me. That's saying I recognize I've got something going on.
It brought something up in me. Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Let's see where that goes. And you might have to go right back. You know, there'll be significant times in your life from a very young age where you remember key things that really upset you. And it might be, you know, mine was when I was about 8, I used to run in and give my granddad a cuddle, and he sort of held me back and goes, no, you're a man now, you shake my hand. And I was like, what the? And to this, you know, that killed me.
Sure,
emotionally. I carried it.
Yeah.
I mean, he did come through when I was talking to a medium many years ago, and he said that he was sorry, which was quite, you know, quite.
He knew you needed to hear that.
Yeah. So yeah, those were, and from that point, that dented the real me. I was like, well, I'm guarded now.
Okay.
I know that people can hurt me by just saying things like that.
Yeah.
So you carry things with you, Nathan, and it's only until you actually realize that you don't have to carry them anymore. You can just be the person that you were meant to be, that you were in this world to be successful. Then you start to grow.
I'm curious though, when it comes to communication between the two of you, and is there a level of maybe curiosity that drives the level of communication that the two of you have, and that it encourages a deeper knowledge of the other person? Because, you know, I think about this from, I'll give a funny example here actually, and I don't know that I mentioned this on the podcast yet, but years ago when my ex and I were married, and we were maybe at times over communicative, but we just knew each other so well because we actively communicated, and we had our friends over to play. There was a TV show here in the US anyway, called the Newlywed Game. And then they made a board game of it as well. So we'd have our friends over and we'd play this Newlywed Game with our friends. And there was at least one, maybe a couple of instances where the friends left, some of them left upset with each other, with their partner, because during that game, they found out things. They've been together for, you know, however many years, but during this game of all things, they found out things about their partner that they didn't realize, and it upset them in one way or another. And that was such really an eye-opening experience. What I've heard and or observed is that many couples exist in that state. They may not even have a terrible relationship per se, you know, a lot of conflict or otherwise, but they just don't actually know each other that well because they're not consistently or actively communicating with each other. Have you all found that to be a challenge in your relationship? If so, why? If not, why not? I'm curious what that looks like for you.
I don't think we have, because we just, if something happens, we talk about it.
Yeah, I think I know him in and out. I know how his mind works. I know everything about him.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd probably say I know him better than he knows himself on some occasions.
Yeah.
So, and I don't judge any of it, but it gives me such an understanding of who he is. And I love everything about him, even the quirky stuff, and
Don't tell her about the quirky stuff.
but yeah, I think because we know each other so in-depthly emotionally, like we might not know what our favorite precious stone was, or what our favorite color is, or anything like that is by the by, but we will know how the other one would feel in a certain situation, or we would know how the other one would act in a certain situation. So knowing the favorite color thing, that doesn't matter in a relationship. That's not real conversation. That's not real getting to know someone. It's about knowing their heart and their soul, and how best to protect their heart and their soul as best you can, whilst making sure you're looking after yourself at utmost,
You actually said something that maybe we'll finish up on here, and I'll again read this verbatim. You said, making sure you both have the same expectations from your relationship, and both of you are wanting to do work you have to in order to make sure you're in the same path. So expectations, it's interesting. You actually use the word, and I don't hear people use this word very often, and at least in the context of relationships. Sarah, you use the word values at the very beginning of our conversation when you were talking about the dating experience. And I think that's a really solid place to start. I would argue maybe the only thing that really matters the most outside of a certain level of physical attraction, because at the end of the day, we're all going to have to work in the relationship in one form or another. There's going to be things that we, to your point,
you have to
disagree on, et cetera. So how did you all lay out those expectations for each other? Was that part of the conversation of what you didn't like with the previous relationship? Or?
Well, I think when it comes to the big things, it's important, such as we knew very early on that this was it. We had to get married and things like that. So we weren't scared to talk about that, I mean, you might meet somebody where their expectation might be, well, we're just going to have fun and see how it goes, and we could date other people and blah. But you have to discuss it. So we all have different expectations, and I think quite early on, I would say within 3 months, we knew. And so we then sort of were able to have those long conversations about, well, marriage and things like that. And
then what you didn't like versus what you're looking for now in this.
Yeah.
I guess they're almost one and the same. What you didn't like from the previous relationships, what you're hoping for in this relationship.
Yeah, it wasn't so much what I didn't like. It was more that because I was a different person then, because you do grow after each relationship.
Yeah.
I would say that I knew what I wanted, and I wanted to make it very clear to him that I was not messing around, and if I was going to commit, I was going to commit, and I needed to know that he was on the same page.
She couldn't help herself.
Paul, I heard you say a couple minutes ago, you said we didn't have expectations. Maybe you didn't have expectations.
Yeah,
this is a very interesting conversation, because I have a hard time balancing, like, any relationship innately is built on at least a certain level of expectations. There's a structure innate to that relationship, right? So
I think assumptions is the word that you meant.
I think, again, it is at another level, Nathan, than that, because how can you possibly expect somebody to do something or conform the way society or their parents has actually molded them? So,
by the way, can we just pause for a second? Because I love the words that you use interchangeably there, expectation and conformity, which again, for me, triggers the word control. That's very eye-opening, but conformity is a wild way to look at the idea of expectation. It's really powerful the way to frame it, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, expectations and values are on the same page, really, aren't they?
You think so? How so?
Because your values are instilled from a very young age. Get to 8 or 9 and your values are set in stone. So you're going to see the world through those values. And whether or not you've actually set yourself some boundaries or not, it's only when you grow as a person that you take full responsibility for who you are, the expectations that you might have as a wife, for example. You're in the kitchen, you're going to do my ironing, you're going to do this. Yeah. Well, yeah, that ain't going to happen, is it?
It might for some, because there might be some women that want that.
It's very easy for women to fall into that category
Yeah.
and men to expect it. But that's not reality.
I think you meant assumptions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
we make assumptions, not expectations.
This is where being your own independent person, but you're in love with each other, and that's it. It's really, it isn't rocket science if you understand
That's true.
who you are.
Yeah.
That is at the core. You've got to love the person that you are. You love the person that you are, you're going to just reflect that. You're going to project it, and it'll come back at you.
If you've got the basics, I think that there is nothing that you can't talk out. There must be a compromise to everything. And if you've talked it out and there's absolutely no compromise, and you've even been to therapy, then you've got decisions to make. But other than that, everything can be worked on as long as you've got the basic of respect
Agreed.
and communication.
That's a beautiful way to sum up the conversation, actually. And I really appreciate you all giving so much time, especially with the time difference. It's quite a bit later there. But thank you so much for being willing not only to share just in general, but to be so open and vulnerable too. I know it's maybe kind of a weird thing to put your business out there for everybody to listen to, but I think that's also how we learn. And so your willingness to do that.
Absolutely.
I will tell things to check out stuff that they had no want or need to know.
We're quite happy to be your superstar guest, Nathan, when you get really big. And today we have Paul and Sarah. They're back.
Yes,
I think the next conversation that we do, I need to come out there and we'll do it in person. How about that?
absolutely. You are welcome here anytime. We've got the room. Come join us.
I would appreciate that. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening in to today's conversation with Paul and Sarah. Make sure, if you're not already following us, to do so on social media. It's Deciding to Love XO on Instagram and Facebook. And we'll, of course, link to any related show notes as well on your favorite podcast platforms. Thanks again. And thanks again for being here with us today, Paul and Sarah.
Welcome. Good to
Love
see you
you
again, mate.
loads.
Love you lots, mate. Take care.